Hello and welcome to another episode of Bookish and Bewildered. It is the Final Girl Fight Club. Yes, you heard me right, the Final Girl Fight Club. Now, according to my girl Wikipedia, the Final Girl refers to the final female character in a horror film or a slasher movie. Illustrious alumni in the Final Girl sphere include Sidney Prescott from Scream, Jamie Lee Curtis from the Halloween franchise, Nancy Thompson from A Nightmare on Elm Street, Danny Ardor from Midsommar, and Samara Weaving from Ready or Not. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the whole Final Girl trope, I would highly recommend the Takes video on the subject. Why have I made a video called The Final Girl Fight Club? Well, I've covered 2 books for Spooktober, which have got Final Girls in them. The Final Girls by Riley Sager, and the Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. The real question is, who did it better? Riley Sager or Grady Hendrix? And that's what we're here to find out. First up is The Final Girls by Riley Sager. Okay, so we meet Quincy, who is the main character. She is the sole survivor of a trip that she took with 5 of her friends, and that happened 10 years ago. She has a beautiful apartment, a baking blog, and a boyfriend called Jeff that she doesn't treat very nicely, in my opinion. And she takes quite a lot of Xanax to cope with PTSD and the nerves and the trauma of what she went through, which is totally understandable. Quincy has blocked out vast chunks of the trauma that she went through, so she has huge gaps in her memory where she just cannot remember what happened. And she is still on good terms with Coop, who is the cop that discovered her running through a woodland covered in blood away from Pine Cottage, which was the scene of the crime. Now, the fact that Riley Sager called the cop Coop might be perceived as lazy writing, but we're just going to let that one slide and go through the synopsis of the book, okay? Now, in Final Girls, Quincy is not the only final girl in existence. There are 2 more women who are the survivors of various massacres. One called Lisa. Lisa survived a sorority slaying, and the other young woman is called Sam, and she went up against a killer known as Sackman during her shift at the Nightlight Inn. Anyway, so Lisa is found dead in her apartment. She apparently slit her wrists in the bathtub. And if that wasn't bad enough, Sam turns up on her doorstep and starts wreaking havoc in Quincy's life. Unsurprisingly, Sam has ulterior motives for her actions, and the story sort of snowballs from there. And there might be somebody hunting down the other 2 girls. Next up, The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. We meet Lynette Tarkington, who is a member of what is known as the Final Girl Support Group. It's a group therapy session attended by other final girls who have survived their own massacres and interactions with serial killers. Lynette survived a massacre 22 years ago that killed her family. Heather is an addict who fought off someone known as the Dream King. Marilyn is a Southern Belle socialite who managed to survive an interaction with some cannibals. Julie Campbell's trauma was turned into a movie franchise. Adrian was a counsellor at Camp Red Lake, which is the site of multiple slayings. And Danny's brother escaped an insane asylum on Halloween and came looking for his sister and killed anyone who stood between them. When Adrian is murdered in her own home by a very deranged young man, it becomes clear that this is the beginning of a killing spree where the Final Girls are all the main targets. Who do I think did Final Girls better out of the 2 books? Well, Lynette and Quincy are both interesting characters as the lead protagonists. They both have their pros and their cons, but Lynette doesn't put herself in stupid situations in quite the same way that Quincy does. I started to openly dislike Quincy as a result, and I ended up rooting for the villain to just get it over and done with so I can put the book down. I couldn't help rolling my eyes because of the amount of times Quincy allowed herself to be manipulated. But Grady Hendrix moved the plot along with more aplomb. It felt like Riley Sager couldn't think of a way to move the plot along without letting his character put themselves in really stupid situations that any rational thinking person would never put themselves in. Grady Hendrix moved the plot along in a more seamless, thought out way. I had a couple of issues with Grady Hendrix's book, but not as many as Riley Sager's. Quincy is an asshole. Lynette could be irritating at times, don't get me wrong, but the difference between Lynette and Quincy is that Quincy puts herself in dangerous positions, whereas Lynette doesn't. Lynette is a survivor and you cheer her on every step of the way. Quincy invites drama and problems into her life. It's just her character trait. It's like blue eyes and allowing drama in. Those are her two main characteristics. Whereas with Lynette has been through some really horrific and traumatizing events. And so she looks at everyone as a suspect. She plans out escape routes for every situation and location. She doesn't want to be hunted down as a final girl. It's one of her main fears in life that her loved ones are going to all die because her whole family is dead. All she has are the final girls in her support group. The villain in The Final Girls by Riley Sager was ridiculous. I thought it could be that person at the beginning of the book when I first started reading it, and then I thought, oh no, maybe it could be this person. It's a bit too obvious, but no, it was the person that I thought it was within like the first couple of chapters. Lo and behold, it was exactly that person. So it was a little bit too predictable. Maybe it's just me because I'm an incredibly cynical bitch, but I didn't like the fact that I guessed the bad guy almost straight away. Whereas in the Final Girl support group, there are so many twists and turns. They are a support group, but there are a bunch of people who've been thrown together who have only one thing in common, really, which is that they have survived slaughters and massacres by crazy people, and they are thrown together by trauma. They don't want to be at the support group. They don't want to be labelled Final Girls. So there is that baseline of resentment that is the heartbeat of knowing each other. But over the years, they have a begrudging camaraderie between each other. And I love to see that. That was very interesting, the dynamics between the girls. I was rooting for Lynette, whereas Quincy, I wouldn't care if she got hit by a bus, like 3 chapters in, genuinely, I wouldn't care. Which is why the winner of The Final Girls Fight Club would be The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I would recommend that book very highly. If you've seen both of these books on a shelf at Waterstones or at an independent bookstore and you're not sure which one that you want to pick up, but you do fancy something like a Friday the 13th slasher with Final Girls in it, I would definitely recommend The Final Girl Support Group over The Final Girls by Riley Sager. It is definitely the superior plot and the superior book. So there you go. That is my first Fight Club. All done and dusted. Let me know what you think. If you agree, drop a little note down below. If you disagree, let me know. Tell me why. I've got a link to the books below also, so if you fancy picking up a copy of either of them just to kind of compare them yourself, feel free. Okay, ciao my darlings, bye bye.